Hey there, today I'd like to go ahead and show you some low light and night photography tips on this tutorial. And these are some really handy tips if you're getting new into doing night photography or you've never done night photography and looking you might be getting into it. So let's get started. So on this tutorial, I'm actually going to go over the best website and apps for night photography. These are really handy to have for planning out your night shoot. And we're also going to look into what gear do you need for night photography. There's some necessity gear that you do need, and it doesn't necessarily cost you a fortune to get either. Also, I'm going to do is what is the best time of year to capture the Milky Way. So we're going to go over the time period depending on what part of the world you might be in for capturing the Milky Way. And this particular shot you see right here was actually taken in Silverton, Colorado. And it was right after the first snow in the fall, and I was able to capture the Milky Way shooting right over town. It was pretty cool being in the right place at the right time. Okay, for those of you that might be following me on social media, have probably noticed a lot of my photographs are night photography type photographs. So if you haven't been following me, you might want to go ahead and check the links below this video, and that'll direct you in the right direction for if you wanted to follow me on Facebook or Instagram or Google+. So a really good website to check out, and this is a free one, it's called Dark Sky Finder. You can either Google it or just go on their website, darkskyfinder.com. This is actually a really slick website. You can actually zoom into the location you're at, and it works for any part of the world you might be in. And what it's going to show you is where the worst light pollution is and where the darkest skies might be in your location. So if you look up at the chart above, you'll see that obviously the brighter the color, that's the more light pollution and less stars you're going to see at night. But to the left, the darker the color, that's the best skies to try to do night photography in. Now a really good app to get for your phone, it's called Deluxe Moon Standard. And what's really cool about this app, it only costs $1.99. It's really cheap. This is a really handy app to have in your phone. And I actually use this one a lot for planning out different shoots at different times of the month. And what's really cool, it actually shows the moon rise and set times. And also it's going to show you on a calendar when the new moon is for the best night photography and full moon for doing more landscape night photography. So a good tip is for gear is to find yourself a good headlamp, but you want to make sure that headlamp has a red light on it. This red light, what's really good about it, it helps from impairing your vision. So I find actually a lot of times when I'm out shooting really late at night for long periods of time, my eyes will actually adjust more and more to the dark skies to where I don't even have to turn on the headlamp even on a moonless night. But as soon as you do have to turn on the headlamp, it can mess with your eyes and then you're trying to readjust again. So a good tip is if you do have a headlamp with a red lamp, you just only use the red lamp when needed, and that'll actually help for keeping your eyes from dilating too much. And a good headlamp with 150 luminum is probably your best bet. And you can actually, what's nice about that bright of a headlamp is you can keep it on the red light and still be hiking along. So the next thing we're going to look at is having a good camera for night photography. Now, the one thing for sure is full frame cameras have the best for low noise. And most of the newer cameras nowadays have amazing low noise on them at high ISO. But I just want you to know, you don't have to buy a super expensive camera to do night photography. In fact, a huge portion of my photographs I'll be showing you on this slideshow were actually taken with a Nikon D3200. Now that camera body alone only costs $350, but it's the lenses that make the difference a lot of times too. Where the full frame sensor does come in is you can actually shoot at higher ISO, and what's really good is you don't have to use the noise reduction in the camera. So for example, you can shoot a 30-second shot with full frame and then shoot another 30-second right after that without having to do noise reduction. Where on the Nikon D3200, I'll do a 30-second shot, and then I have a 30 seconds of noise reduction going on in the camera. So it takes 1 minute to shoot a 30-second shot. And if I don't use that noise reduction feature in that camera, the picture will come out really bad where I can't even fix it in post-production. So full frame cameras, if you have the money, is the way to go for doing night photography. But at the same time, there's ways to get around it too, to save you some money if you're just getting started. Now, an obvious one is having a good tripod. That goes a long ways. You know, having a good tripod to sit, you know, that's going to be sturdy. It's not going to be flimsy. It can hold up into windy situations that come along. And there's going to be a lot of times you might be out shooting at night where the wind does pick up. And that's where it's good to have a nice, good, sturdy tripod that's not going to move on you. And what I like to do with these tripods is to either get a good ball head or a pistol grip. These are two handy attachments for the tripod that work really good for adjusting your camera at night. So these are definitely worth looking into. And once again, you don't have to go out and spend a fortune on a tripod, but it's worth spending at least, say, $150 to get a decent one at the minimum. But you can get away with cheaper ones if you shop around. Now, another one I like to talk about is knowing your camera settings. Now, I can't stress enough that if you're out shooting with other people, it's good to know your camera settings where you're not having to turn your headlamp on all the time, because every time you turn a headlamp on, you're disturbing other people around you that might be doing night photography with you. So a good trick to do is to actually get your camera, hang out in your living room, shut all the lights off, do this at night when it's really dark, and start trying to figure out your buttons on your camera. And the biggest things you want to know is the self timer on your camera, and know the play button and the zoom in and out buttons for checking pictures to see how focused they're in. So that's a good little trick, is to do a little test run on that. And you want to do is look into buying a good camera remote. So one big advantage of a camera remote to use than trying to use your self timer every single time in your camera for shooting night photography is the beeping noise. Now you can do is undo the noise or undo beeping on your programming in your camera. But a lot of times too, just having a remote with the cord hooked into your camera works really good too. So another really good remote, and this is one I use all the time, it's a multi-function remote. Works good for time-lapse photography. And this also works pretty slick too if you want to be in your picture, say you're by yourself somewhere. So what I'll do a lot of times, I'll set this remote to say 1 minute, start it, and then I'll go run to get in position with my headlamp lit up. And then once it clicks down to a minute, then the shot will pull off, which usually can last anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds. So this is a good way to do some self-photographing. And then I also use this all the time for a lot of my time lapse. So if any of you have been checking out any of my landscape photography type adventure videos I do post on this channel, and you see some of those night time lapses, or even the day ones, they're all actually taken with this remote. Now another really cool remote that just came out, and I'm actually getting ready to purchase this one. This one runs for about $100, and it's at alpinelaboratories.com, and it's called the Plus Wireless Remote. This thing is actually really slick. It actually runs off your phone, and you just kind of hook it into your hot shoe up above. And what's really cool with this one is you can do time lapse. You can adjust your settings for different types of photographs, and this makes it like your own remote is what's really cool about it. So it's definitely worth checking this one out. It's probably the most advanced remote that's come out now, so it's definitely one I'm going to add into my arsenal kit there. And obviously it does run off your smartphone, and it's great for time lapse and photographing the stars. So a really good thing to probably put in your camera bag is buy some mag lights for your camera bag, and I'm going to show you why. makes your night photography stand out when you can, what they call light painting with these mag lights. So what I did here, this was taken a couple summers back. I was driving on a remote mountain road late at night, and I came up to this spot, and I could tell off in the distance the Milky Way was starting to break out of the clouds. So I parked my truck, jumped out, set up the tripod, throw on the camera, and I set my self timer on the camera for about 5 seconds. Just didn't want to be dealing with the remote. Then I grabbed a mag light, and I set up the mag light to where it's a harsh setting on it. So you can usually do a real spread out one, or you can go into a tight beam with it. So I set the tight beam on that one, hit the self timer 5 seconds, and then all of a sudden the camera went for 30 seconds. So this was going to be a 30-second shoot on my wide angle 11mm lens. So once the shot started and the lens opened up, I started on the left side and started painting up and down. And I went along the ground. And then I slowly went to the right side, kind of painted up the grass, and then went up the trees on the right side just a little bit. And then I shut the headlamp off. I did all that in 10 seconds. And then there was still 20 seconds left to go for the shot. So I just kind of stayed still, kept it really dark there. And after the full 30 seconds was completed, this was the result of that photograph. And this one actually turned out pretty sweet looking. I did enjoy this night, and I was surprised on how good that photograph turned out. So a good thing with night photography is you want to buy a lens with affinity focus. Now you see down to the bottom right, that's the symbol for affinity focus. And then go ahead and look on your lenses. You might actually have one of these lenses in your bag right now, but if not, I'm going to go through some lenses that you might want to look at buying. So these are really handy for focusing at night. I pretty much always focus on affinity when shooting the stars, because if you don't have that, it's really hard to dial in your manual focus to try to get the stars to look clear. One of my most favorite lenses, which I probably use this one probably 80% of the time when I'm doing my night photography, is the Rokinon 11 16mm f2.8 lens. Some of the things I do love about this lens, it's the wide angle. I can definitely capture a lot of the Milky Way with this lens. And what another good feature is the price on it. This one actually, you can find it online on Amazon or eBay for around 450 bucks. And it's amazing the glass and the quality of pictures I've been able to achieve off of this lens. And what's really good about it, it's a really fast lens at an aperture of 2.8, also known as the f-stop. So the trick is to try to find the lowest aperture lens. So 2.8 or lower, like a 1.8, which is really fast, are really good ones for doing night photography. So another really good lens is the Rokinon 14mm 2.8 lens. Another really fast lens. It's a fixed 14mm where you can't really zoom in or out, but what's really good about this one is the price. And you can find this one online for around 300 bucks US dollars. So it's definitely a good lens, and it's really sharp glass, and once again the quality from this lens is really amazing. So definitely a good one to check out also. So another lens I have in my tool bag is or my camera bag actually, is the Nikon 28mm f2.8 lens. And believe it or not, this lens is very cheap, 50 to 100 bucks US. This was actually my first lens I bought for night photography when I first started getting into it. I was so broke at the time that this was kind of a good intro lens for learning night photography. And I've been able to pull off a lot of pretty amazing pictures over the years. And I still use this lens to this day, and I just can't believe the quality of the glass that's in this lens. When you first buy it, it just feels so cheap, but the quality of images you can get off of it is pretty amazing. And actually that picture to the right was a recent shoot I did. I was up on Boreas Pass, or Hoosier Pass is where that was taken at. And this was actually taken with the 28mm lens. and the quality of that photograph, I was very impressed with it. So still one of my more favorite lenses to this date. Another great lens to look into, and I probably use this lens the second most for night photography, is the 50mm f1.8 lens. This lens is amazing. The quality of pictures I get off of this lens just blows my mind on the glass. And what's really cool about this one, it's still a really affordable lens, around 180 bucks US. And shopping around, once again, on Amazon and eBay, you might even be able to find it a little bit cheaper. That picture to the right was taken with this 50mm lens. And this was taken just outside of Canyonlands National Park on a camping trip I did a couple years back. And we were camping up against this rock wall at this campground. And it was so cool looking with the fire lighting up everything. So I actually walked away from camp, and it was such a calm night that the smoke and everything was just going straight up. So this was one of those photographs that to this day I just love. And it's really cool that, you know, I was able to pull this off with such a affordable lens on top of that. So a good tip to think about when doing night photography, the lower the aperture number, which is your f-stop, the lower the ISO you can get away with. Because here's one thing, if you be cranking that ISO really high up, getting up around 3200 or even 6400 or above, and of course some of these newer cameras, you can get away with that, especially the full frames, and not have such a noisy picture. But if you don't have a full frame camera and you start reaching up to the 6400 ISO or higher, your pictures are going to look absolutely horrible. So the trick is just get yourself a really fast lens, get that ISO as low as you can get away with. Sometimes doing a lot of star photography, 1600 I can get away with. But like this shot here, I was able to get away with only a 400 ISO on this one, which kept it to really less noise. So once again, to review, the lower the aperture number, the lower the ISO, which equals lower noise in your photographs. So if you want your photographs to be nice and clear without having to do a lot of post-production, try to get that ISO as low as possible. Now this photograph was actually taken with the 50mm lens too. And I shot this one up at Copper Mountain Resort, and it was probably about 45 minutes after sunset. There was still a light blue tint in the sky. The stars were just barely starting to show through. And I pulled this off by doing a 5-second exposure at an f5.6 ISO 100. Now to probably make this photograph even better would have been to jump up the aperture to a 7.1, and I probably could have reduced the time down to say 3 seconds. I just basically wanted enough light to show the mountain in the backdrop with the blue light, but yet, you know, try to keep the lights on, not getting too overexposed. As you can tell in this shot, the lights did get a little bit overexposed, and I wasn't able to really dial it in, you know, in post-production there. And another good tip, all my photos I do take are in RAW format. And I purposely do that because I have a lot more control in post-production, especially in Lightroom and Photoshop when editing. And I'll probably do like a lot of future tutorials on how I edit out these kind of photographs. And there's definitely some good tricks to know how to do these. Okay, now I want to show you, or actually tell you, some of the best times to capture the Milky Way. And that is actually starting late spring through early fall. That is when the Milky Way is at what I would call at its glory around here. So this particular photograph was actually shot in early September. I was down in the San Juan Mountains, backpacked way up into the mountains. And a good tip for the Milky Way is to have good southern exposure if you're up in the northern hemisphere. And I wanted this one to be where I had the tent, the fire, have a subject in there, which actually turned out to be me since I was the only one on this trip. And then have the mountains as kind of a backdrop with the silhouette there. So this one actually turned out pretty sweet. I put it in a portrait mode, set up the camera on the tripod, set the timer for about 10 seconds. Once I hit that trigger, I ran over to the fire, and here's a tip. If you're doing this with a fire, you want to make sure the fire is not blazing really bright. So this was just barely burning. It was burning pretty low. And then also I threw a flashlight actually lit up in my tent. And then my headlamp, I had that set at max power. And that headlamp I had at this particular time was pretty cheesy. So there wasn't really a really good beam coming off of it. Where some of the newer headlamps, you can get some just amazing beams. So anyways, I hit that timer of 5 seconds, or 10 seconds, ran over, got in position, and then I had to stand perfectly still for 30 seconds. So here's the settings I used on this one. 30 seconds, aperture 2.8, ISO 1600. So I try to keep the ISO as low as I can get away with to try to keep from so much noise, because this was actually shot with the Nikon D3200. And then I was using my 11mm wide-angle lens. And I like the way this photograph turned out. It actually turned out pretty sweet looking. Of course, I want to redo this photograph now with the full-frame camera. I bet I can even make it twice as better. So, good tip there for you. Okay, both of these shots of old cabins were taken up in a remote section of the San Juan Mountains in southwest Colorado. I was actually out exploring during the daytime, four-wheeling off on some of the old mining roads, and I came across these old buildings, and I noticed they had some really good southern exposure, so I knew the Milky Way would be shining nice and bright above them. So what I did is that evening I went back to town and had shot some sunsets and then ate some dinner, and then decided once it got all dark to drive back out to this location. So to actually get to this spot, I pulled off the highway, and it was probably a good 20-minute drive up a single lane dirt road, which got pretty rough towards the top. And this road winded really tight corners with probably 500-foot sheer drops off the one side, so it's kind of one of those roads you definitely didn't want to drive off of. So then I finally made it to this location. No moon out on this night, so it's really dark. Pulled in. Once I got out of the vehicle I was driving, the wind was just whipping through this location. It must have been blowing 15, 20 to 30 miles an hour sometimes. So anyways, I grabbed my headlamp, grabbed the mag light, set up the camera on a tripod, and the first shot I did pull off was on the upper right hand corner there. So I set the camera for 30 seconds, f2.8, ISO 3200. Now I had to do 3200 on this one because I really had to try to bring out some of the background with the light painting. And I used my 11mm wide angle lens on both of these photographs. So the wind was whipping, but thankfully the wind kind of eased off just a hair where it wasn't howling too much. And I hit the trigger. I had it on the self timer for about 5 seconds. So I hit that trigger, 5 seconds goes, and then all of a sudden, click, it starts, the lens opens up, and I'm doing my 30 seconds recording on this. So once that 30 seconds started, I spent about probably a good 10-15 seconds with the light and lit up the fence in the foreground. And then I had a brighter light I used for the background, where I aimed it to light up the building and some of the trees back there. After I pulled off that photograph, I walked on over to the other building, which you see below. Got up pretty close to the building since I had a wide angle lens. And once again, the winds were still whipping at this point. Set the camera, 5-second timer, hit it. And what was really cool about this is the clouds were whipping across the sky. So anyways, as I was taking this picture, everything was going nice and smooth, and then once the photograph was done, all of a sudden the craziest thing happened. Right then, the wind just stopped instantly, and everything went perfectly still, and then all of a sudden this really cold air came over me, and I got the weirdest feeling I've ever experienced in my life. In fact, my hair on my neck and my arms started to stand up, and I was like, man, this isn't right. pretty much scared the crap out of me. So I ended up right then grabbing the camera on the tripod, threw it over my shoulders, and running back to the SUV I rented for this trip. Popped over in the back of the SUV, just threw my camera in there, ran over to the driver's side door. Right when I put my hand on the driver's side door handle, all of a sudden, the wind came back and the cold air went away. It was probably one of the freakiest things I've ever experienced. I jumped into the vehicle and said, screw this, and spun on out of there. And I was kind of bummed because there was probably 3 more buildings there I really wanted to photograph. But there was a lesson learned on this, and that is, don't photograph at haunted mining camps alone. I am not shitting you on this. So anyways, if you don't believe me, you should go up there to this location, which is located outside of Telluride, and just go do a night photograph by yourself and see if anything happens to you. Pretty interesting place. Okay, I want to show you real quick on some different types of night photography, and these are a lot of them that you might see in my posts that I do post all the time. Obviously, full moon photography, that's a really good one. I love doing full moon photography. So this one was taken for 20 seconds, and I kept my aperture at 7.1. So here's a good tip. If you can keep your aperture at 7.1 to say 8 or 7.1 I found actually is probably one of the best ones for keeping your pictures the sharpest for night photography. So it's kind of the lowest I can usually get away with when it comes to doing brighter nights with the full moon. And yet I can still keep the buildings in the background or whatever subject I might have, and it keeps it nice and crisp and clear. Now, the lower the aperture or your f-stop you go, the more softer your pictures are going to start to look. So, but you usually don't have a choice on that when you're just doing Milky Way shots. But when you're doing full moon shots, you can get away with higher apertures, which creates a really nice picture. And also I kept the ISO as low as I could get away with that aperture setting. I was able to get away with 400 ISO on this one. I used a 12mm lens, and what's so crazy about this location, I was at 13,487 feet above sea level, which is about 4,111 meters above sea level there. And so definitely thin air at this point, very cold temperatures on this night, but it was probably one of the most amazing nights because right when I showed up, this moon was rising over those peaks off in the backdrop. And I love the cast of the shadows that were cut across the ski slopes. If you look kind of on that photograph, you can see the shadows of the trees kind of cutting across there. So I thought this picture turned out pretty cool looking. So another good thing to do with night photography, I call it the blue light photography. So to get the blue light photography, this is either done before sunrise or after sunset. And it's usually, I found the best lights probably around 40 minutes after sunset or 40 minutes before sunrise. You got this little tiny window, probably like 15-20 minutes max, to try to pull off some cool photographs. Now this works pretty slick. On this one I used my 11mm lens on this one, a really wide angle, and this was taken at the Breckenridge Nordic Center Lodge. This is like a beautiful new log cabin lodge you just built, and it was just wrapped up around this period of time, and we had about 1 inch of snow come through and kind of blanket everything. And I noticed the snow stopped, the skies were starting to break, so I was like, just go out for some evening photography. I came up to this location, and you can actually see my tire tracks down below there. And then off in the distance, the clouds are just starting to break where a little blue sky was starting to poke through. So setting my camera, I found the best setting for this shot turned out to be like 15 seconds. Once again, I had my aperture at 7.1. So I can keep the building as sharp as possible, and I was able to get away with an ISO 100 on this shot. So these photographs, if you're ever photographing buildings or homes, this is a great time to do those kind of photographs. It's probably what I call the blue light hour. Your pictures will pop out more than anybody else's, and you want to get jobs out there for shooting commercial or residential. And realtors and stuff too, they just love these kind of photographs. A great way to make extra money out there. So just to give you some good tips. Now, Doing this type of photograph does take a lot of practice, and I'm probably going to need to do a very thorough tutorial in the future on how to pull off these types of photographs. And there is a bit of post-production you could do to really make these pictures pop even that much more. So those will be future tutorials coming down the pipeline here. So another good type of night photography is just going around your city or small town. And this particular photograph I actually shot with my 50mm lens. This was taken for 8 seconds, aperture at f13 and ISO 100. This photograph came in so sharp and it looks really cool. Now, one thing to let you know, when you start cranking up the aperture a little bit, what you're going to notice is the lights will start having what I call like light rays coming off of them. And I'll have to do a whole nother tutorial on that kind of stuff too. It's a pretty interesting effect you can create without even doing, having a special lens or anything. But this particular photograph I shot through a tree because the sky obviously was really dark on this night. There was no moon out. So I kind of stationed it just enough to kind of look through a tree with the fresh fallen snow, and I like the effect on how this one turned out. It turned out pretty cool looking. So definitely a good one to try out there. So another one I like to do is fireworks photography. So during the winter months up here in the ski resorts in Colorado, this was actually taken over at Keystone Ski Resort. And throughout the ski season, every Saturday evening, they shoot fireworks off. So I came over to this location knowing some fireworks are going to be shot. And this particular picture I was able to pull off with my 13mm lens. I shot it for 10 seconds, aperture 7.1. Once again, trying to keep the building and everything look real sharp. And ISO 100. What's kind of neat with this one is some of the people were blurry, but yet some of the people came out perfectly clear in this shot. So it kind of gives it a kind of a real cool perspective. And I was able to capture the streaking of the fireworks at the same time. Pretty cool fireworks. Doing firework photography can be a little challenging, but it's definitely worth pulling off. And there's a lot of people that pull off a lot of amazing photographs you see on the internet out there. So definitely worth trying out. So another tip I want to give you is scoping out your location for doing your night shots. I can't stress enough how great Google Earth is for doing this. I love this program. So they have it, you can actually download it on your computer for free, or they actually have a free app too. I use this thing so much, and because I'm always traveling to new locations, I'm always zooming into these locations, so that way I can figure out where's the sun coming up, where's it going to go down, and try to get some ideas for photographs. So that's another future tutorial coming up. Is I'll just have to go through some details on Google Earth and show you the little tips and tricks on using this program. It's definitely worth downloading. So here's some future upcoming tutorials that are coming down the pipeline. I'm going to actually be making one on promoting your photos on social media and the best time to be posting those. And the biggest thing is the size you post, because you got to remember, especially like Facebook or Google Plus, people can download those pictures into their computer. So you never ever want to upload a full file size picture unless you don't mind it getting stolen out there. And I'm sure I've had many photographs stolen around the world, but those are small file sizes, so it's going to be really difficult for them to be blowing up a really nice big photograph with them. Some other tutorials I'm looking at making for you guys is different. I definitely want to show you ways of backing up your photography, all your digital files and stuff. There's several different steps I do, because back in 2000 to 2002, when digital cameras were really starting to come in, I lost 2 years worth of photographs from a computer crash. And I could blame those on a couple of roommates at the time. And then I also want to make a tutorial on different ways you can make money as a photographer. And there's a lot of ways of making really good money out there. And some are pretty obvious, but there's other ones that a lot of photographers have yet to get on board to do yet. And it's a huge market that's been barely even touched yet. And the potential is just endless, the amount of money you can make off that. So that'll be a future tutorial coming down the pipeline. So anyways, I would definitely subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I got some really good tutorials coming down the pipeline, and also my other videos, and I'm going to try to pull these out on Friday is the day I'm going to try to release these tutorials, and then every Wednesday I'm trying to release the landscape photography adventure videos. And those videos basically is the story behind each photograph, or what I go through a lot of times for taking these photographs. And I try to make them entertaining, and they are a work in progress. So hopefully I'll get them into some TV quality type shows down the road. You never know where those might go. So anyways, I hope this definitely helped you out. If it did, hit that like button down below. Share this tutorial with people that you think it might help them out. And I have many more coming down the pipeline. So you guys be sure to subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. You have yourself a really good one.